My wife told me she was spending Christmas with her ex-husband while I was cutting up a grocery store chicken at our kitchen table. When I objected, she shrugged and said, "Madison needs her real father. If you don't like it, divorce me." I set the knife down. Not hard. I didn't slam it or make some dramatic gesture. I just placed it beside the cutting board because my hand had suddenly gone stiff. It was December 18th, a little after 6:30, and rain tapped against the kitchen window of our house in Westchester, Ohio. I had stopped at Kroger on the way home from work and bought a rotisserie chicken, red potatoes, and a carton of peppermint ice cream because Madison had loved that flavor since she was 12. There was also a small jewelry box hidden inside my briefcase. A silver necklace with a tiny compass pendant. Madison had mentioned one like it months earlier, then forgotten about it. Rebecca sat across from me with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "You're staying with Travis?" I asked. "At a cabin near Gatlinburg. For 5 nights?" "Yes." "And nobody thought to invite me?" Her mouth tightened. "That would be awkward." "For whom?" "You know Travis. I know he missed Madison's high school graduation because he was supposedly closing a business deal in Tampa." Rebecca looked toward the living room. "That's exactly why she needs time with him." I waited for her to look back at me. "She needs her father," Rebecca continued, "without worrying about tension between the two of you. I've never stopped her from seeing him." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Her phone lit up beside her mug. I saw Travis's name and part of a message before she turned the screen over. "Cabin's confirmed. Just like old times. ****. Something inside me went very quiet. "Is his girlfriend going?" I asked. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "That's not really your concern." That answer told me more than a yes would have. I leaned back in my chair. "Rebecca, listen to what you're asking me to accept. My wife and stepdaughter are leaving me home for Christmas so they can stay in a cabin with your former husband. You're making it sound dirty." "I'm repeating what you said." She pushed her coffee away. "Madison wants one Christmas with her real parents. She's 19, Daniel. She's growing up." There was that word again. Real. I thought about the church parking lot where I taught Madison to drive my old Honda Accord. She had nearly taken out 2 orange cones and blamed the brakes. I thought about sitting beside her bed at Mercy Health after her appendix surgery while Rebecca drove home to shower. Travis had promised to come. He never did. I remembered Madison at 11, wobbling down our street on a second-hand bicycle while I ran behind her with one hand under the seat. But apparently none of that qualified as real. "Did Madison ask me not to come?" I said. Rebecca glanced away. "Did she?" "She shouldn't have to choose just to protect your feelings." "I didn't ask her to choose." "You're doing it right now." "No, I'm asking why my place in this family disappears whenever Travis decides to show up." Rebecca stood and carried her mug to the sink. "You've been good to Madison," she said. "Nobody's denying that." The word good landed like an insult. "A good neighbor, a good provider, a good man to call when the car battery died." "But you're not her father," she added. I looked at the plate between us. The chicken had gone cold. "I've been raising her since she was 8. And I appreciate that." "You appreciate it?" "Oh, come on, Daniel. Don't twist my words." I almost raised my voice. I could feel the argument gathering in my chest, every missed dinner, every tuition payment, every time I had rearranged my schedule because Rebecca or Madison needed something. Instead, I asked, "Are you telling me to accept this or divorce you?" Rebecca gave a tired laugh. "It's 5 days. If you can't handle 5 days, maybe we shouldn't be married." "Is that what you want?" "I'm telling you not to make me choose." The strange part was, she sounded completely certain I would back down. I wrapped the chicken in foil, wiped the counter, and carried my briefcase upstairs. Rebecca stayed in the kitchen, probably waiting for me to return, and apologized for making the evening uncomfortable. In our bedroom, I removed the jewelry box from my bag. On the top shelf of the closet sat a lopsided ceramic bowl Madison had made in 6th grade. The glaze was bright blue, and the words asterisk asterisk, best bonus dad, asterisk asterisk, leaned crookedly across the side. I placed the necklace inside it. For a minute, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the carpet. Part of me wanted to go downstairs and negotiate. Maybe suggest Travis visit for one evening. Maybe offer to pay for a second cabin. Maybe make myself smaller until everyone else felt comfortable again. I had done that for years. My laptop chimed on the dresser. The email had arrived from Claire Bennett, Metasphere's regional director in France. Asterisk, asterisk, final offer. European quality director, Lion asterisk, asterisk. The company had offered me the job twice before. 3 years in Lyon, a substantial raise, temporary housing, and responsibility for quality operations across Europe. The first time, Madison was finishing high school. The second time, Rebecca said moving overseas would damage our marriage. Now Madison lived on campus at the University of Cincinnati, and Rebecca had just suggested divorce because I objected to spending Christmas alone. The offer expired at noon the next day. I called my mother. Evelyn answered on the fourth ring. Everything all right? No. I told her what Rebecca had said. Then I told her about France. My mother listened without interrupting. Finally, she asked, would you still want the job if Rebecca apologized tomorrow morning? I don't know. Then don't answer tonight. I've already turned it down twice. That doesn't mean you should take it angry. I'm not angry. Daniel, you're calling your 76-year-old mother after dinner. You're angry. Despite myself, I smiled. Then her voice softened. Don't move 4,000 miles just to make somebody miss you. That still makes your life about them. I barely slept. At 8:47 the next morning, I opened the email again. I read the salary, the relocation terms, and the responsibilities. Then I pictured another Christmas like this one. Another year of being told I mattered right up until my presence became inconvenient. I clicked asterisk, asterisk, accept asterisk, asterisk. My hands shook afterward. Not from excitement, from the understanding that, for once, I had made a decision nobody else had approved. Rebecca left with Madison and Travis on December 22nd. Before climbing into his rented black Tahoe, she asked me to check the oil because Travis had forgotten. Travis can check his own oil, I said. She frowned. You don't have to be childish. Madison hugged me quickly. She looked uncomfortable, but I didn't yet know Rebecca had told her I volunteered to stay home because of work. We'll talk when I get back, Rebecca said. Then the Tahoe disappeared around the corner. I opened my airline confirmation. My flight to Lyon left December 27th. Rebecca thought I would spend Christmas waiting for her to come home. She had no idea that 5 days later I would be gone, and the life she expected me to keep carrying would no longer be waiting for her. Christmas morning was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator cycle on and off from the living room. I turned on the Bengals game even though I wasn't really watching. The announcers talked about playoff chances while I reheated chicken and potatoes in the microwave. I ate at the kitchen table with the television loud enough to make the house feel occupied. At 10:14, my phone buzzed. Rebecca had sent a photograph to our family group chat. She, Madison, and Travis stood in front of a stone fireplace at the cabin. Rebecca wore a cream sweater I had bought her the previous winter. Travis had one arm around Madison and the other resting behind Rebecca's shoulders. The caption read, asterisk, asterisk, finally together for Christmas, asterisk, asterisk. I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. Madison was smiling, but not with her eyes. Her shoulders were slightly raised, the way they got when she was uncomfortable and trying not to show it. I started typing, asterisk, asterisk, Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Call me when you can, asterisk, asterisk. Then I deleted it. Not because I wanted to punish her. I just didn't trust myself to sound normal. I turned the phone face down and finished eating. The next morning, I called Marcus Reed. Marcus and I had known each other since our 20s, back when neither of us could afford decent shoes, and we thought a 40-hour week sounded exhausting. He listened while I explained the transfer, Rebecca's ultimatum, and the fact that I intended to leave in 2 days. You've accepted the job already? He asked. Yes. And Rebecca doesn't know? Not yet. There was a pause. Dan, I'm your friend, so I'm going to say this plainly. Protecting yourself is one thing. Trying to scare her by disappearing is another. I'm not disappearing. I'm leaving a letter. That isn't the reassuring sentence you think it is. I rubbed a hand across my face. What am I supposed to do? Sit here until she gets back and let her talk me out of it? No, but you need to understand what you can legally change before you go. You can redirect your future pay. You can stop covering personal charges that aren't household expenses. You cannot empty joint accounts or pretend marital money belongs only to you. I don't want to leave her without anything. Good, because that would turn a painful situation into a legal mess. Marcus connected me with a family law attorney in his building. By that afternoon, we had a basic plan. I redirected my next paycheck to an individual account. I left enough in the joint account to cover the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and insurance for 2 months. I stopped the automatic payments on Rebecca's personal credit cards and canceled a few subscriptions charged only to me. The leased Lexus she drove was in my name. I didn't report it stolen or demand it back. I simply arranged for the dealership to contact her before the lease expired in January. Then there was Madison's tuition. That one made me sit back from the computer. I had promised to cover part of her spring semester. The payment deadline was coming up. "Don't cancel it out of anger," Marcus said. "I'm not angry at her. You're angry at everybody." He wasn't wrong. I postponed the transfer until I could speak to Madison directly. I wanted to hear what she knew before I made a decision that could affect her schooling. Packing took less time than I expected. 11 years in that house, and most of what mattered to me fit into 4 suitcases and 2 shipping boxes. I took my clothes, work records, passport, my father's hand tools, and a few framed photographs from before my marriage. I left every piece of furniture we had bought together. When I reached the top shelf of the closet, I pulled down Madison's ceramic bowl. One side was thicker than the other, and the glaze had run beneath the word asterisk, asterisk, dad asterisk, asterisk. She had been 12 when she gave it to me. She stood in the kitchen holding it with both hands and said, "It's ugly, but you have to keep it forever." I sat on the bedroom floor with that bowl in my lap. For the first time since accepting the job, I came close to crying. I took out my phone and opened Madison's contact information. My thumb hovered over the emergency contact setting. I couldn't remove her. I was hurt, but I still wanted the hospital to call me if something happened. I packed the bowl carefully between 2 sweaters. I wrote Rebecca a letter. 3 pages became 2, then 1. I removed every sentence that sounded like an accusation. I told her I had accepted the Lion assignment and would be living there for at least 3 years. I said I wanted a formal separation and that future financial discussions should go through our attorneys. I included Marcus's number. Then I wrote a second letter for Madison. I told her I wasn't leaving because she wanted time with her biological father. I was leaving because Rebecca had made it clear that my place in the family could be set aside whenever it became inconvenient. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in my suitcase. I wasn't ready to leave it behind. Not until I knew whether Madison had heard the truth. On Christmas evening, I picked up my mother and drove to a 24-hour diner near Blue Ash because the oven in her retirement building had stopped working. Evelyn ordered meatloaf and complained that the gravy looked emotionally exhausted. "You're moving to France," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "You'd better learn to complain about food with more elegance." "I'll work on it." She reached into her purse and placed a small leather box on the table. Inside was my father's old wristwatch. "He wore that to work for 32 years, she said. "I thought you wanted to keep it." "I wanted to keep it until you needed it." I fastened it around my wrist. The leather was worn soft along the edges. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" I asked. "I think the life you were living is over, whether you go or stay." That wasn't my question. "It's the answer you get." I laughed quietly. Then she put her hand over mine. "Your father stayed in places that treated him badly because he thought endurance and loyalty were the same thing. They aren't." I left Cincinnati on December 27th. Nothing about the trip felt glamorous. My connection in Atlanta was delayed. My suitcase ended up in Amsterdam, and I arrived in Lyon wearing the same wrinkled blue shirt I had slept in on the plane. Claire Bennett met me near baggage claim holding a cardboard sign with my name on it. "You look terrible," she said. "Good morning to you too." That was the polite version. My temporary apartment was smaller than our guest room back home. The elevator barely held me and 1 suitcase. The washing machine had 6 buttons, none of which seemed connected to opening the door. The next morning, I bought a carton of creme fraiche because the container looked like coffee creamer. It was not. At the plant, Luc Moreau watched me struggle with the machine in the employee laundry room and said, "You crossed an ocean to be defeated by a washing machine." "I'm still learning the local management structure." He almost smiled. Then Claire called me into her office. The Lion facility had failed an internal review. A major client was threatening to cancel its contract. We had 60 days to fix the problem. If we don't, she said, corporate may cancel the assignment. So I could be sent back? You could be sent back without your old position. That evening, I walked through cold rain toward my apartment while my phone vibrated in my pocket. 17 missed calls from Rebecca. Her messages changed as I scrolled. Asterisk, asterisk, where are you? Asterisk, asterisk, why is your closet empty? Asterisk, asterisk, what does this letter mean? Asterisk, asterisk, you cannot move to France without discussing it with me at asterisk, asterisk. When I finally answered, she was shouting before I said hello. Daniel, come home. No. Madison is devastated. She thinks you abandoned her. Put her on the phone. She's asleep. At 3 in the afternoon? Rebecca ignored that. Then she told me the cabin trip had fallen apart. Travis had invited a woman he called a business partner. His card had been declined. Rebecca had paid for most of the stay, and Travis had backed the rented Tahoe into a wooden post. You need to cover the charges, she said. We're married. The attorneys can review them. Are you really throwing away 11 years over Christmas? I stopped beneath an awning and watched water run along the curb. Christmas didn't create the problem, I said. It just gave you a reason to say it out loud. That night, alone in the apartment, I almost called her back. Then an email arrived. Rebecca had meant to forward it to Travis. The attachment was titled asterisk, asterisk, Mercer Household Assets and Equity asterisk, asterisk. It listed the house, my income, my retirement balance, my credit rating, and our borrowing capacity. The document had been created 3 weeks before Christmas. I had been telling myself Rebecca made one selfish choice in Gatlinburg. That spreadsheet told me the choice had started long before she packed her suitcase. Daniel, need you to look at this. Marcus, the attachment was a scanned copy of the spreadsheet Rebecca had accidentally sent me, followed by a short note. Asterisk, asterisk, call me before you talk to her again, asterisk, asterisk. I looked at the clock. It was almost 9 at night in Lyon, which meant Marcus had just started his afternoon back in Cincinnati. I called immediately. You got it? He asked. I'm looking at it now. What do you notice? It has every major asset we own. And? My retirement account. Yes. Our mortgage balance. Yes. My credit score. Yes. I rubbed my forehead. So? Marcus let the silence sit between us. Dan, people gather information like this for different reasons. Estate planning, divorce, business financing. I'm not saying Rebecca committed a crime. But this isn't a retirement worksheet. What is it? It looks more like something prepared for a lender. I stared at the columns again. Income. Home equity. Available borrowing capacity. Retirement balance. Life insurance. It suddenly felt less like numbers. It felt like someone had measured my entire life in dollars. I need facts, Marcus continued, not assumptions. Don't call Rebecca accusing her of stealing documents or planning fraud. I wasn't going to. Yes, you were. He knew me too well. I did a little digging this morning, he said. Travis registered a company 3 months ago. What kind of company? Blue Ridge Renewal Group. That sounds expensive. Marcus chuckled. It sounds like a company that wants investors. He read from his computer. Boutique fitness centers, wellness studios, corporate recovery retreats. Does he actually have one? Not yet. So it's an idea. At the moment, Marcus continued. He's formed 2 LLCs before, both dissolved. Bankruptcy? No. Tax problems? One unpaid state tax issue. A contractor sued him over unpaid work. Nothing criminal. I leaned back in the chair. So he's not some mastermind. No, Marcus sighed. He's something more common. What? A man who's always one great opportunity away from success. I had known people like that. Every year brought a fresh dream. A restaurant. A landscaping business. Vacation rentals. Crypto. The story always changed. The ending rarely did. I'll keep looking, Marcus said. In the meantime, talk to Madison. Rebecca won't let me. You don't need Rebecca's permission. Madison answered on the 3rd ring. Her dorm room looked exactly like every college room I'd ever seen. Laundry piled on one chair. A half-finished poster on the wall. 3 coffee cups that probably should have been washed days ago. For a second, neither of us spoke. You really moved, she finally said. I did. You actually live in France? I do. She shook her head. I thought Mom was bluffing. I smiled sadly. So did I. Another silence. Then she asked the question I hadn't expected. Are you mad at me? I looked at her face. The little girl who used to hide behind my leg at elementary school concerts was gone. A young woman sat there instead. Scared. Confused. Trying to understand why her family had exploded over Christmas. I've been hurt, I admitted. That's not what I asked. No. I took a slow breath. I'm not mad at you. She looked relieved. Then guilty. Mom said, she began. She stopped. What did she say? She told me you volunteered to stay home because work got busy. I closed my eyes. For just a second. I didn't. I know that now. How? Madison looked down. The cabin. She laughed once. It wasn't happy. It was awful. She told me everything. Travis had spent nearly the entire first evening talking about his new business. He showed everyone presentation slides, revenue projections, future locations, investment plans. Then halfway through dinner, another woman arrived. Travis introduced her as his business partner. Rebecca hadn't known she was coming. The rest of the trip dissolved into quiet arguments and awkward meals. Mom kept saying we were there to reconnect, Madison said. But nobody talked about me. No. They talked about money. I felt my stomach tighten. What kind of money? She hesitated. I wasn't supposed to hear. What did you hear? She swallowed. Travis said, another pause. He said, she looked embarrassed repeating it. Daniel has the credit, you have the relationship. I didn't speak. He said if Mom could get you to believe in the business, everything would work. The room suddenly felt smaller. What did your mother say? I don't know. You don't know? I walked away. She looked straight into the camera. I thought they were joking. Were they? I don't think so. She rubbed her eyes. Then I saw Mom's laptop. The spreadsheet? Her head lifted. You know about that? I do. I wasn't trying to snoop. I know. I walked into the kitchen looking for coffee. She swallowed again. It was open. And? It had your retirement account. My salary. Our house. She nodded. I asked Mom why she had all of it. What did she say? Madison's voice became very small. She said families share everything. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I suddenly realized how often that sentence had been used whenever somebody wanted something from me. Families share everything. Except Christmas. I wanted Dad to come back, Madison whispered. Which one? She looked surprised. My biological dad. I know. I thought maybe he'd changed. That's not wrong. I feel stupid. No. You don't? No. I leaned closer to the screen. Wanting your father isn't stupid. She started crying. I just didn't know Mom was pushing you out. I believe you. She wiped her face. I should have asked. Maybe. She looked around the room. I thought you knew. I stood and walked to the apartment window. Rain drifted across the narrow Lion Street below. Do you remember that ugly blue bowl you made me? She laughed through her tears. It's still ugly. I brought it with me. You did? It's sitting on my bookshelf. She covered her mouth. I almost threw that away once. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. For the first time since Christmas, I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not forgiveness. Hope. Small. Fragile. Real. Ew. Rebecca called less than an hour later. I heard you talk to Madison. I did. You had no right to drag her into this. I didn't. You've turned her against me. Rebecca? What? I know about Travis's company. Silence. I know about the spreadsheet. Longer silence. It wasn't what you think. Then tell me. She started quickly. We were discussing retirement. The document was created before Christmas. I update our finances every year. It included my credit score. We were being organized. It was prepared for Travis's business. No, no, no. Then why did he say I had the credit? She inhaled sharply. You heard that? Madison did. Rebecca's voice softened. He thought... She stopped. What? He thought maybe... What? If the business worked. I waited. We could all have a better future. All? She didn't answer. I asked quietly. Was Christmas about Madison seeing her father? Yes. Or about convincing me to finance him afterward? I wasn't going to force you. You were going to ask. She stayed silent. That was enough. Before hanging up, she said one sentence that stayed with me all night. I never stopped loving you, I answered honestly. I believe that. She sounded relieved. Then I added, but somewhere along the way you stopped respecting me. The next morning brought a different battle. My first leadership meeting in Lyon went badly. American engineers blamed the French technicians. The French technicians blamed Ohio. Everyone interrupted everyone else. Nobody listened. Afterward, Claire closed the conference room door. You know why corporate sent you? To fix quality. She smiled faintly. No. I waited. They sent you because nobody trusts anybody anymore. She handed me another audit report. If you don't fix that... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. That evening, I sat inside my rented Peugeot in a supermarket parking garage. I couldn't remember which pocket held my apartment keys. For a terrifying moment, I couldn't remember where I'd parked. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. I almost called Rebecca. Almost. Instead, I called my mother. Hard day? Evelyn asked. The hardest. You thinking about coming home? Maybe. She waited. Then she said quietly, a boundary doesn't stop hurting just because you drew it. I closed my eyes. It only stops other people from deciding where it belongs. A week later, Luke walked into my office carrying a dusty maintenance binder. You Americans never read the old reports, he grumbled. Inside were records proving the software problems had started after an update approved in Ohio. The French team had reported it months earlier. Nobody had listened. For the first time since arriving in France, I realized the plant wasn't failing because one side was incompetent. It was failing because nobody believed the other side anymore. The same thing had happened in my marriage. That afternoon, another message arrived from Madison. It contained a photograph of a draft agreement between Rebecca and Travis. Unsigned, but unmistakable. If the Mercer house was ever sold after a divorce, Rebecca intended to invest part of her share in Travis's company. I stared at the screen for a long time. The betrayal wasn't in the money. It was in the planning. Metasphere's leadership conference would bring me back to Cincinnati in February. Marcus had already arranged a formal mediation. Rebecca thought I was flying home because France wasn't working out. She had no idea I was bringing her spreadsheet. And the one witness who finally understood why she had really been invited to that Christmas cabin. I hadn't been back in Cincinnati for almost 7 weeks. The airport looked exactly the same, but I didn't. France hadn't magically fixed my life. If anything, I'd aged a little. I was thinner, slept less, and still worried every morning that one bad audit could send me home unemployed. Rebecca texted before my plane even reached the gate. Asterisk, asterisk, can we meet before tomorrow? Please, asterisk, asterisk. I agreed to dinner at the Precinct, the steakhouse where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. Walking through those doors felt strangely familiar. Same polished wood, same smell of grilled steaks, same piano in the corner. Rebecca was already waiting. She had taken extra care with her appearance. Her hair was freshly styled, and she wore the emerald earrings I'd bought her on our 5th anniversary. For a second, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her. Then she smiled as though the past 7 weeks had simply been an unpleasant misunderstanding. You look tired, she said. So do you. She gave a small laugh. I guess neither of us has been sleeping. The waiter poured water and walked away. Rebecca folded her hands together. I've had a lot of time to think. So have I. I think we both made emotional decisions. I looked at her quietly. My decision came after yours. She sighed. Daniel, do we really have to keep score? No. Then let's stop. She leaned forward. You've made your point. My point? You were hurt. I was. You left. I did. I understand now. I waited. Sus, come home. Just like that. As though France had been a long business trip instead of the biggest decision of my adult life. She reached across the table. I miss you. I didn't move my hand. What about Travis? I asked. Her face tightened. That was a mistake. The trip? Him. The business? All of it. She looked genuinely exhausted. I let myself believe people could change. They can. She looked hopeful. You believe that? I do. Her shoulders relaxed. But change has to happen before people ask for another chance. The hope disappeared from her face. You're punishing me. I'm protecting myself. She lowered her eyes. I never thought you'd actually leave. I know. That was the sentence that stayed with me long after dinner ended. She never thought I'd leave. Not because she believed we loved each other enough to work things out, because she believed I would always stay, no matter how little respect remained. Yay. The next morning, we met at Marcus's office downtown. The conference room overlooked the Ohio River. Rebecca arrived with her attorney. Madison came alone. A few minutes later, Travis walked in carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a navy suit that looked slightly too expensive for him. He smiled like a man arriving to close a business deal. Morning, everybody. Marcus stood. Mr. Cole. They shook hands. As Travis sat down, Marcus glanced toward his sleeve. You still have the retail tag attached. Travis looked confused, then embarrassed. He quickly tore the small plastic tag loose. I must have missed that. Nobody laughed. The room became quiet. Marcus began. We're here to discuss the marital separation of Daniel and Rebecca Mercer. Everything after that happened much more calmly than I'd imagined. No screaming. No dramatic accusations. Just documents, one after another. Marcus slid the asset spreadsheet across the table. Prepared December 1st. Rebecca looked down. Next came Travis's business proposal. My income appeared several times under the section labeled asterisk, potential financial strength. Then the email chain discussing possible financing. Finally, the draft agreement Madison had photographed. Unsigned, but unmistakable. If Rebecca received proceeds from selling our home after a divorce, part of her share would be invested in Travis's company. Rebecca looked overwhelmed. It wasn't finalized. No, Marcus agreed. It wasn't. But you were considering it. She didn't answer. Travis finally spoke. Look, everybody's blowing this way out of proportion. Marcus looked at him. How so? It was just brainstorming. You expected Daniel to guarantee part of your financing? I expected Rebecca to ask. So you did expect it? Travis shifted in his chair. Rebecca turned toward him. You told me we'd rebuild our family. I said maybe. You said we'd have another chance. I said we'd see what happened. She stared at him. You never meant any of it. He shrugged. I was trying to keep an open mind. That single sentence seemed to break something inside her. She had thrown away 11 years of marriage chasing possibilities. Travis had never actually promised her anything. Madison stood before anyone else could speak. I'm done. Nobody interrupted. She looked first at Travis. You kept showing up whenever you needed something. He opened his mouth. She raised one hand. No. He stopped. You weren't trying to become my father. You don't know that. I do. She turned toward Rebecca. And you, Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, kept saying all of this was for me. It was. No. Madison's voice shook. It wasn't. Silence. You wanted your old life back. Rebecca whispered, honey. You used me because saying that out loud would have sounded selfish. Tears rolled down Rebecca's face. Madison looked at me. I'm sorry. I believed she meant it. But I also knew trust couldn't be rebuilt in one conversation. I love you, I said quietly. She started crying harder. But we're going to rebuild this slowly. She nodded. I know. Tauri. Once the emotions settled, the lawyers returned to practical matters. I surprised everyone. I don't want revenge. Rebecca looked up. I want fairness. The proposal was simple. The house would be sold. After legitimate expenses, we'd divide the proceeds according to the law. Neither of us would hide assets. Rebecca would remain responsible for the debts connected to Travis's proposed business because she had authorized them herself. I would continue helping Madison finish college, but tuition payments would go directly to the university. Not through Rebecca. Madison agreed immediately. Rebecca looked confused. I thought, what? You'd try to ruin me. I shook my head. If I wanted that, I would have done it weeks ago. Marcus slid the agreement across the table. Nobody celebrated. There was nothing to celebrate. Only consequences. As the meeting ended, Travis quietly asked Marcus, "Any chance the building validates parking?" Marcus smiled politely. "After this morning?" He paused. "I think walking would be good for everyone." Even I almost laughed. That evening, I attended Metasphere's annual leadership banquet at the Hilton Netherland Plaza. Rebecca had been invited months before the separation, and she chose to come. I suspected she still believed I'd announced my return to Ohio. Instead, Claire stood at the podium. When Daniel arrived in Lyon, she began, he inherited a facility where two talented teams had stopped trusting one another. She wasn't talking only about work. He listened before making changes. He admitted mistakes made on both sides instead of looking for someone to blame. She smiled toward me. Because of that, our largest European client renewed its contract, and our Lyon facility will remain fully operational. Applause filled the ballroom. Then came the announcement. I had been officially appointed permanent European quality director. There was still hard work ahead. The plant hadn't become perfect. Neither had I. But I had earned the opportunity to keep building something worthwhile. After the applause faded, Rebecca met me outside the ballroom. "You really aren't coming home?" "No. You chose strangers over your family." I looked at her for a long moment. "No. What then?" "I chose a life where being dependable doesn't mean being disposable." Her eyes filled again. "I honestly thought you'd always be there." "So did I." She reached for my hand. I stepped back, not angrily, just enough to protect the space between us. "I loved you, Rebecca." "I know. I probably always will in some way." Hope flickered across her face. Then I continued. "But love isn't enough if respect keeps disappearing." She lowered her hand. For the first time since Christmas, neither of us argued. There was nothing left to defend. As I walked toward the hotel exit, I realized something unexpected. I had imagined this moment for weeks. I thought I'd finally feel victorious. Instead, I simply felt lighter. Not because Rebecca had finally understood, because I no longer needed her to. People like to imagine divorce as one dramatic day in court. In reality, ours unfolded over 5 quiet months. There were meetings, paperwork, appraisals, signatures, and long stretches where nothing seemed to happen except waiting. The house sold in late spring, not for what Rebecca had hoped. The inspection found roof damage we'd both ignored for years, and the housing market had cooled just enough to knock the price down. After the mortgage, repairs, realtor fees, and legal costs, neither of us walked away feeling rich. I received my share. Rebecca received hers. There were no last-minute tricks, no hidden accounts, no dramatic courtroom speeches. Just two people dividing the life they'd spent 11 years building. Marcus called after everything was finalized. "Congratulations." It doesn't feel like something to celebrate. It isn't. So why congratulations? Because you made it through without becoming someone you would have been ashamed to meet. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. He was right. There had been moments, especially during those first weeks in France, when revenge sounded much more satisfying than dignity. I'm grateful I never chose it. Rebecca used a large portion of her settlement to pay debts connected to Travis's failed business plans in the Christmas cabin. I didn't enjoy hearing that. I also didn't rescue her. That was probably the hardest lesson I learned. Helping someone and enabling someone are not the same thing. For years, I'd confused the two. As for Travis, he disappeared almost as quickly as he'd reappeared. Once it became obvious there would be no investment, no loan guarantee, and no access to my retirement savings, his phone calls to Rebecca slowed to almost nothing. One afternoon in August, Madison sent me a news article from Cincinnati. A local television station had covered the grand opening of Travis's newest venture, a luxury mobile sauna business. The promotional trailer had somehow rolled down a slope parking lot and stopped halfway into a decorative pond before the ribbon-cutting ceremony even began. Madison added only one sentence beneath the link. Asterisk, asterisk, his latest business literally went downhill. Asterisk, asterisk. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Then I texted back. Let's not make a habit of laughing at people. Once is probably enough. Asterisk, asterisk. She replied with a laughing emoji anyway. That was progress. Not because we were making fun of Travis. Because we were finally sharing ordinary moments again. Rebecca and I spoke only when necessary. Mostly through email. Occasionally by phone if something involved the house or final paperwork. Then about 6 months after the divorce, I found a handwritten envelope in my mailbox in Lyon. The return address was Cincinnati. Rebecca. I made coffee before opening it. The old version of me would have opened it immediately. The newer version understood that not every letter demanded an instant emotional response. Her handwriting looked exactly the same. She apologized. Not in the vague way people sometimes do when they're mostly apologizing for consequences. She named things. She admitted she'd mistaken my patience for endless acceptance. She admitted she'd used Madison as an excuse because saying she missed the fantasy of her old family sounded selfish. She admitted she'd expected me to keep fixing problems she created. The sentence that stayed with me most was simple. Asterisk, asterisk. I stopped noticing everything you carried because you always carried it without complaining. Asterisk, asterisk. I read the letter twice. Then I wrote back. Only one page. I thanked her for telling the truth. I told her I genuinely hoped she found peace. But I also said something I'd never been able to say during our marriage. I forgive what happened. I cannot return to it. That was the end of our correspondence for several months. And somehow it felt healthy. Life in Lyon slowly became less foreign. Not easy. Just familiar. I learned which bakery sold the best bread before work. I stopped getting lost on the tram. Eventually, I even figured out the washing machine. Luke insisted this qualified me as half French. I still can't understand the parking signs. Nobody understands the parking signs, he replied. Not even the French. Working with Luke became one of the unexpected gifts of my new life. On Friday evenings, we'd spend an hour in a community woodworking shop restoring old furniture. My first project was terrible. A small end table with one leg slightly shorter than the others. It wobbles, I said. Luke examined it thoughtfully. It has personality. I think it has gravity. It can have both. The second project turned out much better. A walnut keepsake box. I mailed it to Madison for her 21st birthday. A week later, she called. You made this? I did. It actually looks professional. I'll pretend that's a compliment. It is. She was quiet for a second. I use it every day. Our conversations became regular after that. Sunday afternoons for me. Sunday mornings for her. She found a part-time job at the university library. Started paying for her own books. Stopped asking me to solve every little emergency. We didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. We simply stopped letting it control every conversation. The following summer, she visited Lyon. Watching her step out of the arrivals gate made me unexpectedly emotional. She looked older, more confident. She hugged me so hard I nearly lost my balance. I missed you. I missed you too. A few days later, I invited Luke and Claire to dinner. Halfway through the meal, Claire smiled at Madison. So how did you meet Daniel? Madison didn't hesitate. He's my dad. The restaurant suddenly became very blurry. I looked down at my plate until my eyes cleared. Later that night, as we walked back along the Rhone River, I told her she never owed me that word. I know. So why now? She slipped her arm through mine. Because now I'm old enough to understand who actually showed up. Neither of us said anything else. We didn't need to. The following Christmas looked nothing like the one that had changed my life. My mother flew to Lyon carrying enough snacks in her suitcase to feed a small army. Within an hour of arriving, she'd already complained that French coffee cups were too small, elevators were too narrow, and sidewalks were entirely too confident. The bread's excellent, though, she admitted. So I suppose I'll forgive the country. On Christmas morning, I stood in my apartment kitchen making coffee. A year earlier, I'd been standing alone in Cincinnati, staring at a photograph that made me question my place in my own family. Now 3 mugs waited on the table. Mine, my mother's, and one beside my laptop. Madison joined us by video from Cincinnati. She held up the walnut keepsake box. It's getting full. With what? Good memories. A little later, another message arrived. It was from Rebecca. Asterisk, asterisk, Merry Christmas. I hope you're happy. Thank you for everything you did for Madison. Asterisk, asterisk. No requests. No guilt. No expectations. Just a simple wish. I answered, asterisk, asterisk, Merry Christmas to you too. I hope you find peace. Asterisk, asterisk. That was enough. Looking back, people sometimes ask whether moving to France was my revenge. It wasn't. Neither was the divorce. Neither was Travis losing another business. The real turning point happened much earlier. It happened the moment I stopped believing love required me to accept disrespect. Walking away didn't erase the pain. It simply gave it room to heal. If you've ever had to leave a place or a relationship to protect your own self-respect, I hope you know you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest goodbye becomes the first honest step toward a better life. Thank you for listening to my story.